Okay, it's 2 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Web Dev Room. My name is Jeff Wood, and today we're going to be talking about building fact sheets in Canva. If there are any sound issues, please let me know right away on the chat pod. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and jump into this. I'm going to start with a brief overview of the workspace of Canva, and I might go into more detail about that next month. We're going to try to stay focused on the fact sheet elements of Canva today. Realize this is still an evolving process. Canva is still fairly new within CSU and with the CSU extension system, and we're still kind of trying to figure out the nuts and bolts of the workflow here. So if you have any questions, you have any suggestions about the workflow, about Canva, about fact sheets, feel very free to email both or either Ruth Wilson or I, and I'll give you those 2 email addresses at the end of this session. Feel free to use the chat pod. Let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow. I'm going to hit you with a quick poll to get a sense of how much experience you've had in Canva, just so I know what level to gear this at. Okay. Looks like we've had quite a wide range of experiences here. Okay, thank you for filling that out. Let's go ahead and begin. I do want to throw a huge shout out before we begin to Britt Herring, who put all the Canva stuff together, put all the extreme amount of logistics involved in putting this together for us and for CSU Extension. So appreciate Britt Herring's work. And she also put out a group of 6 videos on how to work in Canva that are really useful. I'll give the URL for that during the course of this presentation. They're on my website if you go to video tutorials and look under Canva. But Britt, again, has just done a huge amount of work on this, and I really appreciate it. And my last caveat, and we'll actually begin, is that I'm not a graphic artist. I'm colorblind, which kind of puts a crimp right there in my ability to do graphics. My job here is to show you the tools involved in working with fact sheets and in working in Canva. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump in. I've got a couple of slides here about the fact sheet process, and then we'll jump into Canva. This URL right here explains the fact sheet process. The big points here, generally they're no more than 3 pages long, though they can go much longer. The one I just finished and we'll look at today is 9 pages long. So don't consider 3 pages to be a limit of any kind. It's sort of generally, they're about 3 pages long. Original research requires 3 reviewers. Non-original research in your fact sheet does not require those reviewers. Ruth Wilson assigns those reviewers. Now we're currently without a director of communications. That was Britt Herring. But their job is to review the fact sheets for AP style and for layout and design. So between me and Ruth, we'll be taking care of that review. And to submit a fact sheet, the URL is right here. I'll be posting this PDF of this PowerPoint on my website probably with the end of the day, certainly by the end of the week. So this URL will let you know that entire fact sheet process. There's also a infographic. You can see a little snapshot of it right here, a little thumbnail. And that URL is right here. Basically, it's telling you, you pick a topic, you write your fact sheet, you submit the content of that fact sheet for review, you format it, we'll need to review that as well, and then you publish it. So there's a little more detail on the fact sheet. There's a lot more detail at this URL right here. So what is Canva? It's a great resource for compositing content. When I talk about compositing content, I'm talking about combining disparate aspects, text, images, video, logos, background colors, whatever you have. We're not talking about simple graphic work. If you're looking to do simple cropping and resizing of images, Canva's not a good place for that. A better space to do that in is Photoshop, the new Pixlr, which is Pixlr X, Pixlr 10, which doesn't use Flash anymore. GIMP is the open source version of that as well. The Canva that we're working with is branded, so it's got the CSU colors, CSU fonts, CSU logos, all preloaded in it. So it's going to save you a lot of decisions and a lot of worry about whether you're getting along with CSU graphic standards, because you already have your font set, your color set, and your logo's preloaded in there. Canva is good for making fact sheets, newsletters, social media graphics, anything involving text and graphics. And the things we're going to be covering today are putting in text, putting in images, and putting in documents. At the very end, I'm going to talk a little bit about working with tables because a lot of fact sheets work with tables. Photoshop's required for this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But next week, I'm probably going to explore the table creation process in a lot more detail. There are 10 accounts on Canva for CSU and CSU Extension. Here are 8 of them. So you probably got these earlier in an email sent out by Britt. You just look up where you are or what role you play, find the Canva username that applies to you and the Canva password that applies to you. So realize occasionally you have to go outside the boundaries of your account to share it with other people who are on a different account. And that's a small logistical problem in Canva, but it's certainly not insurmountable. I am, by the way, in front range Canva 1, though I'm jumping all over the place into all 10 accounts. So one more slide, and we'll actually jump into Canva. There are 3 toolbars. There's 2 sets of tools in the Canva workspace. Over here at the top, we have 2 toolbars. We have one here, and we'll look at this in real life in just a second. These apply to the document as a whole. You can go back home. You can use the file menu, which is really, really useful for things like moving it to another folder, saving, things like that. You can resize it. That's particularly useful when you are reusing graphics in different contexts, like you might use one as a newsletter and then use a part of that as a Facebook header or an Instagram post, that kind of thing. So resizing is helpful. This is the undo button. Over here, you're allowed to change the name of it. So you might go from copy of Managing Cattle Impacts to Managing Cattle Impacts. And then over here, you're able to share the document. You're able to download the document directly in a multitude of formats, and then you're able to publish it directly from this button. So that's the toolbar that applies to the document as a whole. The one just below it, right here, is a toolbar that morphs to allow you to manipulate whatever you have selected on Canva at the time. As you can see here, these all relate to text, so you can kind of figure out from that. We probably have a text box selected when this screen grab was taken. You can see the font here, font size here, color. The bold and italics are grayed out, but we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Alignment, spacing, and more. Over here on the right, you have, you can duplicate that specific element. You can reposition it in very general terms. You can copy the style of it for use on another object, work with transparency, work with links, work with locked sections, or simply dump it in the trash. So those are the top 2 toolbars. The one on the right allows you to add elements into your document, how to move to different folders, and so on. And rather than talking more, let's actually jump into Canva and see what all this looks like. So I'm going to do a share of my main screen. There we are. We're in Canva. I'm in the Front Range Canva 1 account. Remember, there are 8 of these. So I first need to grab a document before I show you these toolbars. Here are a bunch of the folders. This is not a real useful way to find your folders. For instance, there's 4 4H folders here, but they all belong in different, they're all subfolders of larger folders. Let me quickly click this 4H. So the name of this folder is 4H, but if I click this less than sign, I can see that this is the 4H folder within the PRU folders folder. If I were to click this second 4H and then click this less than, I can see that this is the Arapahoe County 4H, and so on. So an easier way to look at all your folders is simply to look at the top folder level right here. And this just gives you your main folders here, at least in the Front Range Canva 1 account. Now, a useful item in here before we move on. Shared with you. There's a lot of documents shared with you. A lot of the initial templates were shared with you, and a lot of images that people think might be useful or documents that people might be useful are here. And there's a huge number of items that have been shared with you. So if you're looking for a specific template or just looking for other examples of templates or of newsletters, whatever you want to work with, that shared with you is a good option to go to. I'm going to move down to my own folder here, which is technology training, and we'll click that. I have 6 templates in here, so I'm going to click one of these. We'll start with the blank fact sheet template, which is what we'll be working with today. I'll simply select it. I almost always make a copy. I perhaps obsessively make a copy rather than edit existing document just to make sure that I don't lose any changes. You can go back to previous versions of documents, and I'll show you how to do that as well today. But as a rule, I make copies rather than start from scratch. So with all that said, once I bring up a document, we can see our 3 toolbars. Here's my first toolbar, that top one that applies to the entire document. This takes me home. This file menu has a lot of important stuff on here. I can rename it up here. I can also do that over here. I can create a new one. I can show my margins, which I believe are at ½ an inch. That might actually be an inch. I don't work with that much. I do work with the print bleed one, which is 1/8 of an inch out. And this template, the fact sheet templates, works with 1/4 inch margins. I'll turn both of those off and keep going. If you're working with more than one brand, which we're not, you can switch your brand kits here. It auto-saves really, really quickly, actually a little too swiftly for my taste. Here's a save button, but you almost never need to use it because it auto-saves so often. Save it to a folder. I use this button constantly. You just select it and you can put it into any folder within your account. So if I'm working with a Weld County template, or I'm working with a Yuma County template, I can't do that from here. I've got to share it with them and then have it save in their own folder. So I can only save to folders that are within my account. There's kind of some boundaries between these accounts. Version history I just mentioned. So this one just has 1 because we made a copy, but there'll be a whole range of versions down here, particularly when you're working in a document because it's auto-saving so often, and each autosave gets its own version. So you can really go back in time well using that version history. And we've got make a copy of it here. We have a help option here. We also have a help option down here. You can resize it. This is something not available in the free version of Canva, but is really useful. As I mentioned before, it's particularly useful for reusing graphics in other contexts, like turning a Facebook post into an Instagram post. And if I hover over these, it's giving me the dimensions of the post. So you can easily resize something, kind of move the elements around so it fits, and then reuse a given graphic for other purposes. I can rename here just by taking out copy of, for instance. My share button allows me to share with others. This is a workaround from that problem of not being able to go to folders that are not within your account. You can share it with anybody in the CSU system, or you can share it within larger accounts, such as in this case, Front Range Canva 1. This allows you to download in various types. The ping ends up using a zip file. I tend to work with the PDF print, the high quality print, and I just share that document after I've downloaded it. You do have the option to publish directly right here, for instance, to Facebook or to Twitter or a presentation. But I think that downloading is better because you have a little more control over the process that way. That's the top toolbar. I'll select my text box here, and we see this open up. This is my font list. And again, this changes into a different toolbar depending on what I have selected. Those are my fonts. This is my font size, font color. Now my bold and my italics are grayed out. but don't let that fool you into thinking you can't use bold or italics, because if I use the font pull down, I can change this to, for instance, Proxima Nova regular italic and work with an italic in this way. I have Vitesse bold, Vitesse medium, and Vitesse book italic. So where you can't use the bold and italics over here, you can choose a font that has italics and bold part of its regular features. The rest of these are pretty standard. Underlining you shouldn't use because it implies a link. Here's your alignment, uppercase or lowercase, bullets, spacing between lines and between the letters. I can duplicate an element here, position it in really broad terms using this. This isn't real helpful. I can copy styles here, work with transparency, work with links, though there's an issue there, and I'll talk about that in just a second. If we're dealing with locked areas, this is the lock. And then finally, here's if I want to trash one. Now, a quick word about links, because I don't really go into that in either slide today. If you want to select a specific phrase in your fact sheet, a specific set of words, and then link them, it seems like you're able to do it, but you can't. In other words, you can select those words, and I can go to the link option and put a link in here. That's not going to give me a link to the selected text. It's going to be a link to the entire text box. So if you want to add a link to an object, you use this link tool. If you want to add a link to specific sets of text, you're going to have to do that after the fact in a PDF. If you're working with a PDF, just add the link after the fact. If you're working in HTML, add the link in the HTML after the fact. So that's a minor inconvenience in Canva is you can't link to individual bits of text. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll keep going. I think we're done with that toolbar. This toolbar here on the right, or on the left rather, templates. This does not apply to our templates, but to the templates that come shipped with Canva. I doubt we'll be using these, but they are quite well designed. Photos. These are photos that come shipped with Canva. Actually, this photo right here is one I pulled from the photos that come shipped with Canva. The first ones that you'll see are free. If you scroll way down, you'll see that some start to cost. You'll see the dollar sign. I think that all of the ones that cost $1. So it doesn't cost much. The best thing about these photos is that they're all, you don't need to worry about copyrights or rights at all. If they're on Canva, you're able to use them without attribution. You don't need to worry about restrictions on modifying them, copying them, or reusing them. If they're in Canva, you can reuse them without bothering to make an attribution of who made the photo. So it's a really nice set of photos, and you have a search box in here to help you look through those photos a little more accurately. Photos that you upload will not be in this section. Elements. I use some of these lines, shapes, frames, and so on. The grids, I've tried working with Excel tables and was rather disappointed, though it can be done. So you have basic shapes, basic frames, icons, and charts right here. Text we'll be working with a lot today. There are a lot of very cool font combinations down here, but we're not going to be using these because our brand fonts are right here. So I click that one, and then I've got a subheading font down here, and I've got a body font down there. So I can there are my three. If I click inside them, I can see this is Vitesse Book 31.5 point. That's my main heading. That's the title that goes right here. It would actually be smaller when it goes up here. My subheading is Clavica 18, and my body text is Proxima Nova 0.12. I can change the sizes on these. You want to keep your body text at 12. Subheadings, I keep at 14. Heading, the only heading you should be using is up here, and the size of that's going to be locked, I think, at 14, even though if you pull it in from here, it'll say 31.5. So I'll delete all three of these. We'll work with these a lot more in just a little bit. I'm actually going to lasso them with a drag and a click to select all three simultaneously. and then hit delete. So that's the text icon. There are videos available right here. You can insert videos into Canva documents, though I haven't done much of that. Background, if you want to change your background, you can. You need to make sure you're working with CSU colors if you do so, and you can change your colors of your background up here. I'm going to stick with white because this is a fact sheet. Uploads, you'll be working with a ton, and you'll notice that my seeming obsession with tables, these are all the tables that I've been uploading in the past few days. So if you're working with fact sheets, you're working a lot with tables, and we'll be talking about tables in quite a bit of detail later in this session. So you add your uploads up here. You uploaded images right here. We'll talk about image formats that can be uploaded in just a bit. They're the standard ones. You can upload JPEGs, you can upload PNGs, GIFs, bitmaps, TIFFs, I believe that's it. Logos, you have some CSU logos loaded here. There are others available in SharePoint, but some very useful ones are right here. Folders that I've worked with are right here, and the more simply gives me a few other apps to interact with as I'm working with it. So those are the 3 toolbars. If you have any questions, please use the chat pod. Otherwise, we'll start to jump into the nuts and bolts in this with a little more detail. So let me go back to my PowerPoint, and we'll keep going. Folders. You need to keep your materials inside your own folders to prevent an incredible sprawl of graphics and documents on Canva. To keep things organized, your own folder should be inside your county or organization folder. So you'll be creating a subfolder within an existing folder most of the time. I mean, you might be creating your own main first level folder, but I think most of you are involved in a county or an organization of some sort. So create subfolders within that. You open the folder, you use this icon here to create the subfolder. I would suggest sharing it with all of CSU. That's why you notice the shared with you section is so large. That's a good thing because it's giving everybody else at CSU just a look at what other people are doing and to share designs, work with each other's designs, and so on. I would not click notify by email because that will add to a lot of spam-like emails. So share it every time. Don't notify CSU by email. You can move materials from folder to folder within accounts. I think I'm probably beating that like a dead horse right now. So within your account, you can share to other folders. You can't cross the boundaries between accounts. The workaround for that is to share using that share button we already looked at, that upper right-hand corner share button, and you can allow them to edit the document or simply view it. And we're almost ready to jump into Canva and stay there for a while. Opening your template. There's a ton of fact sheet templates in Canva in each of those 8 email domains. The easiest way to find one, because there are so many, is to scroll through that shared with you section that I showed you at the very beginning. You may also find them in my own folder, which is in Front Range Canva 1 in the technology training folder. I have several templates in there, and as I create more fact sheets and more newsletters, I'll put them in technology training inside Front Range Canva 1. If you would need a fact sheet template or a template of any kind and can't find it, email me. I'll be happy to share one with you through that Canva interface. Once you have the template or the document that you want to work with, make a copy of it, rename it, and then put it in your old folder. That way you'll keep from overwriting other people's edits, and you'll not overwrite an existing template. So make a copy, rename it, put it in your own folder. And again, if you're having problems finding one, email me. I will jump on it and get a template to you. Now, some areas in these templates are locked. Most of them are not. They really allow you a lot of room, a lot of freedom to create these as you will. Some areas have the font locked, but the content unlocked, meaning you can type in whatever content you like, but you'll not be able to change the font size or the actual font style. And I won't go into this workaround right now. To add pages to the template, use the plus at the top of the page. To copy a page, use the copy icon. Remember, when you're adding pages, to change your page numbers and to include the disclaimer, which I'll point out on the last page. Finally, it's cool to have white space at the end. You don't need to make all the content exactly match the white space in the document like you would in, say, a newsletter. If you have questions, use the chat pod. Otherwise, we will finally jump into Canva. Again, you pull in headings, which are Matisse bold, medium, or book. Your subheadings will be in Clavica. Your body text are going to be in Proxima Nova, and that should be set at 0.12. To add bold or italics, I showed you, you can't use the bold or italics buttons. You can pull down fonts that have italic or bold with them. There's a tricky thing in working with the text boxes in Canva. It's a little bit annoying, and we'll see it in real life in just a second. You can adjust the width of a text box. You can't adjust the height. The only way to adjust the height in Canva is to add content. Now, another problem with Canva in text, and I don't mean to diss Canva because I really do like the product, but you can't use overflow text the way you would in, say, Publisher, where you can slam all your text into that first column and then use arrow icons to have it bleed into the next column, the column after that. You've got to individually copy and paste your text in there to get the column to be the right height. You remember where you stopped, and then you keep texting or keep copying and pasting in more of your text. So be aware, the only way to control the height of a text box is with content, and because there's no text overflow, you've got to do a trial and error system of finding out exactly how much text goes in each one of those boxes. So let's jump into Canva and work with text for a while. And I can hear a collective sigh of relief as I do so. Here is my Canva. I'm using Control and Plus to make this a little bit larger. And we're going to go to these first areas up here. So I've got a cheat sheet to work with. My first thing I need to do is add my title. So I'm going to pull up this Word document for this Managing Cattle Aspects when Impacts when Grazing on Wet Soils. We'll be using this content for the majority of this tutorial. So Control and Copy. Go back into Canva, paste it in here. Get rid of this line break. Line breaks show up a lot in Canva, and you've got to go back and get rid of them. That's my title. It's my title. My fact sheet and my livestock series and health are already set up. So we'll go to my authors next. I'm back in my cheat sheet. Here are the author names. I'll copy those. Go back into Canva. Control A to select it all. Add my author names. Notice this automatically picked the font that we needed and the italics. I'm going to put an asterisk at the end, and that asterisk points to the author affiliations down here. I don't have my author affiliations text, but when you're creating a text sheet, a fact sheet on this quick facts column at the bottom, that's where your author affiliations go with an asterisk that refers back to your authors. Let's go to quick facts next. Back to my cheat sheet. Here are my 4 bullet points. We'll copy and paste these in, and with many other things in Canva, you're going to have to do some finessing after the fact. I click inside, Control A to select everything, Control V to replace it. So I'm going to click inside here and Control A again, and with everything selected, I'm going to go to this toolbar right here and change my alignment to left, just with a click. And then need to go back, get rid of these artifacts for my bullet points and the unnecessary line breaks that create bullet points. And realize that when you're working in Canva and you're working in cut and paste, you're going to have to do some cleanup like this whenever you do a cut and paste. It doesn't take long. And it's not rocket science, but it is something that needs to be done. So those are our quick facts. Our color is already preset here. Our font and our font size is already set. So your author affiliations, go here. Let's keep at it. So here's my first text box. Let me first show you one thing. If I make this bigger, my text gets bigger as well. We don't want that. So I'm going to Control Z back to my original size. So you want to have at least the width of these figured out before you add your text. My header comes first. I'll go in here, grazing and soil structure, Control and C to copy. Back in, we'll put this in as my header. This is the wrong font. So after I correct that line break, I'm going to select this again, and I'm going to use this pull down. Remember that Clavica is what we want to use for our subheaders. So this becomes Clavica, this will be Proxima Nova, and this is our body text. So I want my text to go from here to about here. Now, I've worked with this before, so I know that this covers most of that area. When you're making these yourselves, you'll need to, that's more of a trial and error process. So I select this body text, Control V to paste in my new ones, and then as always, I've got to go in and quickly change my line breaks. And then I can see that there's one line here at the end, so I go to the end and I hit delete, and that fits rather nicely within this text box. Now down here, we have what appears to be text wraparound, though it's not really a text wraparound an image. This is a text wraparound that's done manually. So I need to add 3 elements to this: my picture, my caption, and then my smaller column of text to make it appear to be a text wraparound. I get rid of all 3 of these with, again, that lasso method. Select all 3 and hit delete, and we'll start from scratch. We'll bring in our photo first, and we'll talk about photos in a little more detail in just a little bit. We'll go to uploads, scroll past all my tables. Here's an example of pugging. Click once. I know you're used to double clicking as I am. If you double click twice, you're going to have 2 images up there and you need to delete the first one. So you'll get used to double clicking, or single clicking rather. I'm going to size this down, and I'm using my arrows now to move it down. And we'll resize it into this spot right here. And again, you're fine-tuning rather than dragging. It's probably best to use the arrows. Notice that you have line guides to let you know when you're lining up with other elements. I think that's good. Our caption is next. So I'm going to go to text again. I'm going to pull in, add a little bit of body text. I'll pull it in here. I will use these side walls and adjust my width. And again, the height will be determined by my content. I go back to my cheat sheet, grab my caption text right here, Control and C, go back to my fact sheet, and then I'm going to reselect this and Control and V it in there. It's too large now. It's a caption, so it needs to be smaller. So Control and A to select everything in there, and we'll pull this back to size 8. And then the way to make it italics is, again, not to use this button, but to go to my pull down and use Proxima Nova regular italic. And then our last bit is to mimic the effect of a text wrap. I'll again grab that, add a little bit of body text option, pull it into my document, size it. The right side I can size with these, sizing the blue dotted line, and then I'll kind of guess at this margin. And then I know from previous experience that that's enough room for one more sentence. So I'm going to pull in this sentence, right click, and to copy, go in, paste it in there, Control A to select it all. I'm going to need a line left, change my text breaks, fine tune it so the space between the lines looks like it's a wraparound. And I think we're good there. Yeah. So that is how to create a column that has got body text, a subheader, a picture, a caption, and the illusion of wraparound text. I'm actually going to move that up a couple more spots. Anybody have any questions about text before we move on? Okay, we'll keep going then. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. There we are. Images are next. You import them into Canva by going to Uploads and then to that top bar that says Upload Your Image here. You can work with JPEGs, GIFs, bitmaps, TIFFs, or PNGs, most video formats as well. You click the image once to insert it into your document. You position, size, and crop the image. You actually saw me do this earlier. It's sometimes hard to select an image that you're working with, and if it gets under, when you resize it and it ends up being under columns or under another picture, it's really hard to grab again. So I tend to keep a corner or an edge of my image kind of away from my text columns and away from my other objects, so it's easy to select. Try not to resize images larger. That's particularly true of photographs. In the case of tables, you kind of have to do that. We're going to be working with a table next, so you'll begin to see my obsession with tables grow. There are two tools once you pull an image into your document by clicking it in that uploads box. You're going to have the standard resizing circles that you've always had to resize the image, like you saw me working with earlier with that pugging example. But you also have these straight lines on every wall of your image, so both the top, the bottom, and the two sides. And those walls work as cropping tools. If you drag them in, it crops your image. If you drag them farther away from your image, it oddly zooms in on your image. And it really, particularly if you're working with tables, can really mess you up. So I recommend working with to resize, working with those corner circles as much as possible. And as far as those walls, use them as crops by pulling inward, but you want to avoid pulling them outward or it zooms out on everything and it will mess you up big time if you're doing exacting work on things like with tables. There's a crop tool available at the top as well. Feel free to use that instead. So let's jump in. We'll actually pull in a table this time, and then we'll look at an example of another table we did to talk about images. So let me share my Canva screen right here. Let's go to our second page. Incidentally, something I brought up at the very beginning, you use the plus to add new pages. Probably more useful is the copy page because that will keep your text columns, that will keep the various things like this disclaimer at the very end, your page numbers, and so on. So we're here on page 2. I'm going to delete this table by just hitting delete, and we'll pull one up fresh. We'll go to my uploads, and let's find one. Let's go with this one. I'll click it once, and there we have it. So I'll pull this down, and then the best way I've found to resize and center these is I use one of the corners and just below my cursor there, I can see the width of this. I'm going to pull this down until I'm at 8 inches, which lets me know that I have exactly a 1/4 inch on either side. And then I'm going to drag it over until I get that solid blue line. So now I know that this is 8 inches long. I know it's centered, and thus I know there'll be an 1/8 or a 1/4 inch on either side of it. So you saw me resize using these standard sizing circles right here. Obviously, I have too much table here, so I'm going to use this bottom flat line, and I'm going to pull it up, and I'm going to crop it. I guess this would be the best cropping spot for that. So I can crop it in that manner. So these wall sizing options are really useful as kind of default cropping devices. I can go up here with this selected and choose crop and do the same thing. Here are my cropping tools right here. But I find it's actually a little easier to work with these walls. What really messes you up, I'm going to pull this back down to the bottom of my document, the original document. And if I pull a little farther, notice we're zooming into the whole thing. And if you do that, it's really going to mess up the size of your text. And if you're working with any lines in your tables, it's going to mess up with the positioning of those lines. So really try to avoid ever pulling back on these, because you'll start to zoom in on your image. That happens with photographs as well. Real quickly, I'll go up here, select this, and if I pull this wall down, we start zooming in on the pug. Now, if that's something you want, that's fine, but it can really mess with your spacing easily. Are there any questions about that? Okay, feel free to use the chat pod. If I'm going too quickly and you want me to go over something again, I will. Otherwise, I'm going to talk a little bit more about tables because they are in so many fact sheets, and because I spent the last week and a half kind of working with them intently. So back to our PowerPoint. There we go. So tables are kind of a complicated process. And let me point out at the outset, I'm more than happy to help you with this. I've done it a lot, so I'm pretty used to the ins and outs of it. So if you find this next bit confusing at all, you can just quit listening and send me an email and say, hey, can you help me with this table? And I would be glad to. So most of your tables are going to start out as either Word documents or Excel documents. So DocX or XLSX, as we see up here. First step is to turn them into PDFs. That's really easy to do in Office. You just save as and change the file type from DocX or XLSX to PDF. That part's pretty easy. After you make it into a PDF, you need to turn it into a JPEG. That can't be done easily in Microsoft Office. It can't be done in Pixlr. So you could use GIMP. There are a number of other tools you could find online. The way I like to use is Photoshop. And I realize a lot of you don't have Photoshop out there or aren't comfortable working with Photoshop because the learning curve can be so steep. However, it's fairly easy to do in Photoshop. And next month, I'll show you how to do that. And I'm more than happy to do it to you at any time. So what you do, you take the document, after you've turned it into a PDF in Microsoft Office, you pull it into Photoshop, you crop the table out if necessary. You don't always need to do that. And then you save it as a JPEG. You could save it as a PNG, but JPEGs work better for this purpose. And then you import it to Canva as an image, the same way you would import any other kind of photograph. So one more time, take your existing Office document in Office, turn it into a PDF, then use Photoshop to turn it into a JPEG. Here is the fact sheet that we're working with. I've got text columns here. My quick facts are here. Author affiliations are right here. Our attributions are right there. Picture, caption, several pictures and captions. My key, thanking someone for the photos, because these photos are not stock photos, but photos that we uploaded into Canva. And then here are the first of many, many pages of tables. Now these look to be just one table each, but if I click on them, I can see there's one piece of a table there that's merely one row deep. There's another piece of table that's right here. And because that represented a page break, I needed to pull in a third table down here. So if you're working with lengthy tables like this, you're going to have to do a lot of pulling the table in, adjusting it to 8 inches and centered, and then kind of putting them on top of each other to get the desired effect. So let's take this one. Let's delete this for now. So the effect, I'll use this table to send apart shade. I'll delete that and go, hopefully I can find that in my uploads area. And then to grab a new table, I don't think it's this one, but we can work with this one. Again, you pull it out to 8 inches, and I'm using this guide here in the lower left-hand corner to let me know that it's 8 inches wide. I drag it to center it. That way I know I've got an 1/8 inch on either, or a 1/4 inch on either side, and then I truncate it using this cropping tool. I can then add another bit of table by pulling it in there, sizing it out to 8 inches, again using that the bottom lower right-hand corner, the W, 8 inches. I don't care about my width. I center it by looking for that blue line. I'm going to need to go a little smaller. And then I'll pull out the names of my rows. I'll pull this into match. I'm going to use arrows for fine tuning. And there we go. And then finally, I would go to the bottom of my page and I would crop out those last few rows. So it's a matter of slowly building these tables by putting them in one by one and aligning them up. Anybody have any questions about any of this? Okay, well, that's been about an hour, so I think I've about run out of time. A couple of more things, and we'll call it a day. Let me share my PowerPoint one last time. So here's some resources. Brett, as I said, made some excellent training videos. They're up on my site at this URL, training.extension.colostate.edu, in my video tutorial section. All these URLs will be up on the PDF of this PowerPoint on my site. Again, training.extension.colostate.edu. My email is right here. Ruth's email is right here. We're both happy to help you as much as we can. And before you say goodbye, if you could quickly give any evaluation on this, I would appreciate it. So let me pull up my poll and launch it. So you just let me know how useful this was to you. If it was too fast, too slow, or just about right. Was it too hard, too easy, and just about right? Thank you very much for coming. Feel very free to email me if you have any, not only any questions or suggestions, but if you want to suggest what specific trainings about Canva you would like. And make sure and check out Brett Herring's videos that she did on Canva, because they're really helpful as well. Thank you all for attending. If you're interested in Canva, I would strongly suggest showing up next month for the Canva tutorial on working with tables. And I think we'll call it a day. I'll leave the eval questionnaire up there for a little while, but Thank you very much for coming, and we'll talk to you in about a month. Thank you.